Since its release, Starfield has lost around 300,000 players on Steam alone. That's 300,000 people who paid full price, played the game like once or twice, and just never picked it back up. You could argue this is the fate of any single-player game, and you'd be partially correct. Skyrim and Fallout 4 show similar trajectories on SteamDB. However, I would have expected Starfield to retain a few more players given that it's the newest Bethesda title out. I think that there are some other factors at play here aside from just being a single-player game that has caused so many to leave the player base. To give you a short list, many report that a handful of rotating locations can be found on any given planet, and they're all more or less laid out the same. Loot makes no sense, or just isn't that impressive. The story feels bland, corporate, and inconsequential. The weapon design is better than previous entries, but still ridiculous in many places. The gunplay is the best it's ever been, but Bethesda gunplay has never been good. Exploration feels pointless once you realize there are like 20 reskinned flora and fauna across dozens of planets. I remember having similar complaints about Fallout 4, and despite being one of my most played video games, I'll be the first one to tell you every single flaw it carries.
That's my handsome guy.
Just like Starfield, I knew it was a mediocre game that only ever treads surface deep with its ideas, but I also had trouble putting it down. So instead of continuing Starfield, I went back and I played Fallout 4 just to see how the new Bethesda title stacks up against its big brother. I can say without a shadow of a doubt that despite all its flaws, Fallout 4 is the better game. It's not perfect, but it is better. But why is this? Okay, hear me out. The game is aged like milk in many ways. Vanilla textures look bad, the story still sucks, the voice protagonist is 100% worse.
Pest exterminator. I heard you had a feral problem.
Which is actually one thing Starfield vastly improves on. But as Captain John Price once said,
improvement, but it's not hard to improve on garbage.
The weapon design throws me into fits of rage. How did they think this thing looked cool? How are my enemies supposed to take me seriously? What the hell? The gunplay is fucking terrible as well. So what exactly does it do better than Starfield in this case? It's the setting and mods. Fallout 4 has a commonwealth, of environmental storytelling. The gameplay loop in Fallout goes something like this. You start from your quest giver, walk along to the quest, find a random POI, and you explore it. I mean, why not? You're already there, it's right there, all you gotta do is go inside, maybe you need some more loot, who knows? I'm not your dad, that dude left 20 years ago. While exploring, you find there's actual backstory to this place. There were once people here, who lived lives within the universe, had families and friends. There's a sense that this place was once important, and so were the people within it. You might even find a few skeletons lying around with suggestive things placed around them. You become invested because your time in the setting lends plausibility to the storytelling. Exploration feels like discovery because there are things to discover, and that's why exploration is so fun in this game. I'll give you an example. There is a story told over around a dozen notes that outlines the history of a raider gang in the Lexington area. The notes detail around internal conflict and make reference to insider history within the gangs. This is actually really good storytelling. We get a unique insight into what is otherwise just a faceless mob of NPCs for us to kill. We can even sympathize with them for all of 5 seconds before we send them to Jesus. This story has violence, it has grit, even if it's somewhat toned down for what would be appropriate of a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Starfield, on the other hand, only has things to discover in quest-relevant locations, like the Legacy and its long-past crew during the Crimson Fleet's storyline. You will not find this in the randomly generated locations and dungeons on the different planets. Even if you did, it's very unlikely you would care, because the game simply takes you out of the setting far too often. You are constantly bombarded by menus and loading screens because you have to fast travel everywhere, because, as it turns out, space is just really, really big. It takes forever to actually fly from one spot to the next. And while I get that this might be more realistic and closer to the real thing, it doesn't necessarily make for fun and engaging gameplay, especially when your ships don't really go all that fast to begin with. Exploration in Starfield as a result just ends up feeling way more tedious than it needs to be, and that is probably the worst thing that a game of this kind could be. The difference being in Fallout 4, most of the time you're just exploring, walking around with your radio on, shooting stuff, collecting things, looting containers, so on and so forth. Not to mention that Fallout 4 also had loot that matters. Everything, even the smallest piece of junk, has some sort of purpose in the larger scheme of the game. And looting has massive payoffs with the settlement system as well. This isn't to mention crafting either, which, mind you, Starfield also has, but for some reason, none of the junk you come across, and there's a lot of it in Starfield, none of the junk you come across ever gets used towards anything but selling it to merchants. I mean, I get that this is different from Fallout 4 and, you know, obviously the setting in Fallout 4 lends itself to repurposing junk and stuff, but why couldn't we also have that here? Like, we could have used it for the Outpost system in Starfield, which, by the way, is just a stripped-down version of the settlement building from Fallout 4 anyway. And without the ability to recruit spacers and travelers to your outposts, it really doesn't even feel that important to bother with setting them up, because it doesn't feel all that impactful. In Fallout 4, settlement building felt great because you got to set up a settlement that pretty much functioned as another population center outside of Diamond City, which, mind you, is the only really large population center that doesn't just want to kill you on sight. I feel like if the outpost building in Starfield was just a little bit deeper, it would actually be enticing to set them up and build them, because as of right now, it's pretty much just a way to use your resources. I have faith that that's all going to be fixed with mods. However, that's not going to be right this moment because mods are still not really here for Starfield. I know it's a bit early, and Fallout 4 has like 10 years of modding behind it, but there are basically no transformative mods for Starfield. Any of the really big, impressive, game-changing mods we see are clothing mods or their UI mods. And if you're okay with the UI like I am, it's not necessarily a big deal for you to go ahead and download mods just yet. There's nothing really there. Most of the cooler mods want you to download Starfield Script Extender, which does not work on Game Pass. It only works on the Steam release. And I am not spending $100 on this game for the promise of good mods in the future. Not happening. Fallout 4, by contrast, might have its glaring issues, but all of these can be remedied with mods. Tons of mods. There are thousands upon thousands of mods out there to fix and cater your game experience to exactly what you would like it to be. And this is exactly what Starfield needs the most. Because if mods can make an 8-year-old game feel exciting, they can fix anything. And they can absolutely fix Starfield. It'll take some years, but hey, it took Cyberpunk 3 years to become one of the best RPGs of the decade. So I'm confident that anything can happen. And besides, if there's one thing that Bethesda has ever excelled at, it's at making the world's best AAA modding platforms. This video is already longer than I wanted it to be though, so I'll just say if you want me to go over some of the mods I have installed, leave a comment down below. Otherwise, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. If you didn't enjoy it, send it to your worst enemy so they can lose 10 minutes they'll never get back. I'm Snail, take care, brush your hair.